Frank Fritz was a reality TV star, a man with a passion for uncovering forgotten treasures, and a household name on American pickers. But behind the laughter, the incredible finds, and the road trips, there was a darker story, one filled with struggles, heartbreak, and a tragic twist that no one saw coming. What really happened to Frank, and what led to his devastating downfall? Stay with us as we uncover the untold story of Frank Fritz's final days. Frank Fritz's death took his family and fans by storm. A man who once lit up television screens with his passion for antiques and forgotten treasures was suddenly gone. His passing left a void in the hearts of those who followed his journey from a small-town boy to a television star. But to understand how it all happened, we must first take a step back and look at where it all began. Frank Fritz was born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa. From an early age, he exhibited an insatiable curiosity about the world around him. Unlike other children who spent their days playing with toys, Frank was drawn to objects with history. He had a knack for finding value in what others discarded, a skill that would later define his career. His childhood was filled with small treasures, rocks, beer cans, stamps, and coins, each holding a story he wanted to uncover. Growing up, Frank wasn't just interested in collecting, he had a deep appreciation for craftsmanship and authenticity. His ability to recognize unique items separated him from his peers. He wasn't simply hoarding objects, he was preserving a piece of history. This passion only grew stronger as he got older, shaping the man he would become. Frank's parents, Bill and Susan Fritz, encouraged his interests but didn't fully understand the extent of his passion. They saw his growing collections as just another childhood hobby, something he would eventually outgrow. But for Frank, it was different. Every object he found sparked a sense of wonder. He would spend hours searching through garage sales, flea markets, and even dumpsters, looking for overlooked gems. Friends and family often recalled how he would show up with an old tool, a vintage sign, or a rare bottle cap, enthusiastically explaining its history. This deep fascination wasn't just about the objects themselves, it was about the stories they told. Despite his love for antiques, Frank's childhood wasn't always easy. He was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract. The illness made his school years challenging, as he often had to deal with severe symptoms. However, Frank never let it define him. Instead, he poured himself into his passion for collecting, using it as both an escape and a motivation to push forward. As he entered his teenage years, another passion emerged: motorcycles. Frank was drawn to their history, their mechanics, and the freedom they represented. He didn't merely want to own them, he wanted to restore them, to bring them back to life. He started working odd jobs to save up money for his first bike, a purchase that would mark the beginning of another lifelong passion. His love for motorcycles was all about preservation, just like with antiques. He found beauty in the old and forgotten. He would spend hours in his garage, taking apart engines, polishing chrome, and restoring bikes to their former glory. This skill would later prove invaluable during his time on American pickers. During his early years, Frank met Mike Wolfe, a fellow collector with a similar passion for discovering lost treasures. Passion for forgotten treasures, the two quickly bonded over their shared interests. They would go on picking trips together, hunting for rare finds and uncovering unique items. Their friendship was built on a love for history, adventure, and the thrill of the hunt. Even before their television fame, Frank and Mike had already developed a reputation in the antique community. They were known for their ability to spot valuable items in the most unexpected places: barns, junkyards, abandoned homes. Their chemistry and knowledge complemented each other perfectly, setting the stage for what would eventually become a hit television series. Before finding fame, Frank took a more traditional career path. He spent nearly 25 years as a fire and safety inspector working across Iowa. His job was far from the world of antiques, but it provided stability and financial security. Even while working a full-time job, his love for picking never faded. On weekends and during his free time, he continued hunting for unique finds, refining his expertise in antiques. Frank's years in fire safety taught him discipline and attention to detail, traits that would later help him in his television career. It also gave him a unique perspective on history, as many of the buildings he inspected were filled with forgotten treasures. Every inspection was an opportunity to discover something new, to stumble upon a relic of the past. Despite having a stable job, Frank always dreamed of turning his passion into something bigger. He and Mike often talked about starting a business together, one that would allow them to do what they loved every single day. The idea of a television show wasn't even in their minds at first, they simply wanted to make a living from their passion. However, fate had other plans. Frank Fritz had spent years refining his eye for antiques, building friendships with fellow collectors, and dreaming of turning his passion into something bigger. For most of his life, he had been a fire safety inspector, a stable but unremarkable job that paid the bills but never truly fulfilled him. His heart was always in the hunt, the search for forgotten treasures buried in barns, attics, and junkyards across America. He had a gift for recognizing value in the old and discarded, a skill that would soon catapult him into the national spotlight. But what no one could have predicted was just how massive his rise to fame would be, or how that same success would set the stage for the heartbreaking struggles that would later define his life. By the early 2000s, Frank's longtime friend and picking partner, Mike Wolfe, had a bold idea. He believed that there was an audience out there, people who would love to watch two guys travel the country, uncovering hidden gems and sharing the fascinating stories behind them. Picking was a way of life, and Mike was determined to bring that lifestyle to television. For years, Mike pitched the concept of a picking show to various networks, facing rejection after rejection. The idea seemed too niche, too specific. Television executives didn't think the average viewer would care about rusted signs, vintage motorcycles, or oil cans from the 1930s. But Mike refused to give up. He knew there was something special about the stories behind the objects, about the thrill of the hunt. He also knew that Frank was the perfect co-host, a guy with deep knowledge of antiques, a natural charisma, and a down-to-earth personality that viewers could relate to. Together, they had an undeniable chemistry, the kind that couldn't be faked. Finally, in 2010, after years of persistence, the History Channel took a chance on them. The network agreed to produce a show about their picking adventures, showcasing their journey across America in search of rare and valuable finds. They called it American Pickers. The first episode aired on January 18, 2010, and it was an instant hit. Viewers were hooked. Unlike traditional antique shows, which focused on polished items inside auction houses, American Pickers brought something fresh to the screen, two guys crawling through barns, digging through forgotten junk, and negotiating deals with quirky collectors. The show had an authentic, unscripted feel that made it stand out. And at the heart of it all was Frank. Frank's appeal was undeniable. While Mike often took the lead in negotiations, Frank played the perfect counterbalance, sharp, funny, and unfiltered. His easygoing nature made him a fan favorite, and viewers connected with his ability to turn every object into a story. Whether he was talking about old gas station memorabilia or vintage motorcycles, he made history feel alive. However, with success came intense pressure. The demands of filming a hit television series were far more grueling than most people realized. The American Pickers crew spent months on the road, traveling from one location to another, often working 12 to 16-hour days. It was physically exhausting, digging through cluttered barns, lifting heavy items, and spending hours negotiating deals. For someone like Frank, who had Crohn's disease, the travel and stress made managing his health even more difficult. As the show gained popularity, Frank's personal struggles became harder to ignore. Fans began to notice that he was losing weight, and whispers started circulating about his health. But Frank kept most of his struggles private, determined to push through the difficulties and continue doing what he loved. For most of his life, Frank dealt with a condition many fans weren't even aware of, Crohn's disease. Diagnosed as a young adult, the inflammatory bowel disease caused severe digestive issues, unpredictable pain, and frequent trips to the hospital. Crohn's disease isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a debilitating condition that affects every aspect of daily life. Flare-ups can lead to exhaustion, weight loss, and extreme discomfort, making even the simplest tasks challenging. Despite this, Frank rarely let his condition slow him down. He was known for his high-energy personality and sense of humor. But off-camera, he often struggled through pain and discomfort that few people saw. Being on the road for months at a time made managing his disease incredibly difficult. Unlike a normal job where someone can take a sick day, filming American Pickers required long hours, unpredictable schedules, and constant travel, factors that worsened his health. Fans began to notice Frank's fluctuating weight throughout the seasons, sometimes appearing noticeably thinner than before. But few knew the full extent of what he was going through. Despite his chronic illness, Frank tried to keep up with the demanding pace of the show. However, over the years, the pressures of fame and the physical toll of his work started to wear him down. One of the biggest blows came in 2020 when Frank underwent major back surgery. The procedure required the placement of 2 rods in his spine and left him with a long and painful recovery process left Frank unable to work, forcing him to take an extended break from American Pickers, which led to speculation about his future on the show. During this period, Frank's personal life also started to unravel. He had ended a long-term relationship with his fiancée, Diane Bankson, in 2019 under bitter circumstances. Diane accused Frank of infidelity, and their breakup was filled with public accusations and personal pain. The combination of heartbreak, chronic illness, and career uncertainty pushed Frank further down a dangerous path. As Frank dealt with back pain, emotional stress, and health issues, he turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism. At first, it was a way to numb the pain, both physically and emotionally, but over time, it became a habit that spiraled out of control. In interviews, Frank admitted that he struggled with drinking, especially during the height of his personal and professional struggles. His drinking habits grew worse following his surgery, as he tried to manage pain and depression on his own. By 2021, his addiction had become too obvious to ignore. His longtime friend and American Pickers co-star, Mike Wolfe, publicly addressed Frank's battle with alcohol, revealing that it had played a major role in their strained relationship. "He's been like a brother to me," Mike said in an interview, "but sometimes people need to help themselves before you can help them." Frank later admitted that he had gone through rehab for alcohol addiction, stating that he spent 77 days in treatment, determined to regain control of his life. He emerged from rehab optimistic about the future, claiming he had lost 65 pounds and was focused on living a healthier lifestyle. But despite his best efforts, the damage had already been done, both personally and professionally. While Frank was recovering from surgery and battling addiction, American Pickers moved on without him. In 2021, the History Channel officially announced that Frank would not be returning to the show. Fans were stunned. For years, Frank had been a key part of American Pickers, and his absence was deeply felt by longtime viewers. But behind the scenes, the split had been a long time coming. Frank had not spoken to Mike Wolfe in over 2 years. Their once close friendship had turned into a distant, strained relationship fueled by personal struggles and professional disagreements. Frank made it clear in interviews that he felt abandoned by both the network and his co-star. "I didn't leave the show. I finished shooting, and then I never heard back from them," he said in 2021. His departure wasn't just a career setback, it was a heartbreaking loss of identity. For more than a decade, American Pickers had been his life. Now, it was over. Trying to rebuild his life after leaving American Pickers, Frank kept a low profile. He focused on his antique business in Iowa, determined to carve out a new chapter in his life. Despite his absence from television, he still had a loyal fan base, many of whom rallied for his return to the show. But things weren't getting better. His departure from the show had left him feeling betrayed and isolated. He and his longtime friend and co-host, Mike Wolfe, were no longer on speaking terms. Frank also struggled with financial concerns. Without the steady income from American Pickers, he had to rely on his antique store and personal savings. Though he had built a strong reputation in the antique community, it was a far cry from the security he once. Frank had once enjoyed the financial security and fame of being a television star, but on July 14, 2022, tragedy struck when he suffered a massive stroke at his home in Davenport, Iowa. The stroke was so severe that a close friend found him unconscious and immediately called for help. If he had been alone any longer, he likely wouldn't have survived. Doctors quickly determined that the stroke had caused significant damage to his brain, affecting his speech, mobility, and cognitive abilities. He was immediately hospitalized and remained under intensive medical care. For fans who had followed his career for years, the news was shocking. This was the same Frank who had spent years traveling the country, haggling over antiques and cracking jokes with Mike. Now, he was fighting for his life. After his initial hospitalization, Frank was moved to a rehab center where he began the grueling process of recovery. Stroke recovery is never easy, and in Frank's case, it was especially challenging due to his previous health issues. His struggle with Crohn's disease, his past battle with alcohol addiction, and the years of stress from his career had already taken a toll on his body. Now, the stroke had left him in a fragile state, requiring around-the-clock care. Frank's condition was so severe that a court-appointed guardian was assigned to oversee his finances and medical care. Friends who visited Frank during his recovery described him as a shadow of his former self. He had once been full of energy and wit, but the effects of the stroke had left him struggling to perform even the simplest daily tasks. Despite their falling out, Mike was deeply affected by Frank's condition. Shortly after the stroke, Mike took to social media, asking fans to pray for Frank's recovery. It was one of the first public signs that Mike still cared deeply for Frank despite their differences. Fans of American Pickers were heartbroken. Many had hoped for a reunion between Mike and Frank, a chance for them to mend their friendship and perhaps even bring Frank back to the show. But now, that dream seemed impossible. For the next 2 years, Frank remained largely out of the public eye, with his friends and family focused on his care and rehabilitation. Progress was slow. Finally, on September 30, 2024, the world lost Frank Fritz, a man whose passion for history, antiques, and adventure made him a beloved television personality. After months of speculation, the official news arrived, and the tragedy of Frank Fritz's death was utterly heartbreaking. According to his death certificate, Frank passed away due to the long-term effects of a cerebral infarction, a condition in which the brain suffers damage due to a lack of blood flow. In the weeks leading up to his passing, Frank had been in a fragile state. His movements were limited, his speech impaired, and his ability to engage with the world around him greatly diminished. According to sources close to him, Frank had come to terms with his fate, though it was undoubtedly a difficult reality for him and those who loved him. One of his closest friends revealed that in his last conversations, Frank spoke about his love for antiques, his time on American Pickers, and the friendships he had built along the way. Despite everything he had been through, he still held on to the things that had made his life special. News of Frank's death spread quickly, and the reaction was one of deep sadness. His former American Pickers co-star Mike Wolfe was one of the first to speak out, despite their strained relationship in the years prior. In an emotional statement, Mike said, "Frank was more than just a co-star, he was my friend for decades, and even though we had our ups and downs, I never stopped caring about him. I'm heartbroken that he's gone, and I hope people remember him for the passion, humor, and love he brought to the world." Others in the antique and reality TV community also paid tribute, remembering Frank as a man who had a true love for history and a deep respect for the objects and stories he uncovered. Fans flooded social media with messages of condolences, reminiscing about their favorite moments from the show American Pickers, and sharing stories about how Frank had inspired them to take an interest in collecting. Many were particularly saddened by the fact that Frank and Mike never had the chance to truly reconcile. For years, fans had hoped that the two friends would set aside their differences and reunite, either personally or professionally. But life, as it often does, had other plans. In the end, for many, Frank will always be remembered as the bearded, sharp-witted, beer can collecting picker who made history fun.